trash that was clearly visible was a pile of monthly magazines that I would read, revise, underline, highlight, and whatnot, and retain nothing. This may sound silly, but I told myself I'm not going to leave any space that UPSC has given me to write an answer. They can go ahead and penalize me for exceeding the word limit, but I will go on. Right. So, I think it's very inefficient to rely on willpower.
Yeah. And then you'll end up feeling guilty, and then that sets in, and then regrets set in, and all these negative emotions just take a massive toll. And that struggle is so bad.
At that time, I wanted to do something, be of use somewhere, and tell myself that I can do something. And that is why I reached out to the Civilsdaily team, and they were kind enough to offer me a role. Even after I checked papers at Civilsdaily, and I developed the sense of what's a good answer and what's a bad answer and what should not be done. So when it was my turn to actually start writing answers for the mains, I was still not able to completely execute it.
Hi everyone, bringing back another episode of Raw and Real. Today I have Uma with me, AIR3. She's going to join in administrative service this year. And I was just having a pre-chat with her where I wanted to know her inspiration to become an officer. And it turns out that her dad was already in police services, and his stories and nuances of the day kind of kept egging her till a level. But she eventually chose IIT for a while. But the story of how she chilled in the final year and she decided to give the exam and the decisions post that are very interesting. So I thought, let me just open up the chat. Hi, Uma. Before you go to the IIT final year, I want the people who are watching this video, I want to break this down. What's going to happen? We're going to know the initial inspirations for Uma, what she did in her college, and then subsequently her attempts, which she gave for the UPSC, the gaps which she found herself while she was self-evaluating, what she did to fill them up. And while we'll be talking about this, all the books and the sources and mentors and some of the guidance will come. Then she did an interesting stint with us where she was a part of our mains enrichment program. And we'll get to know more about what a good answer is from an average answer, so that those nuances help the guys who've written prelims just about a day back, and they're able to, write the mains with the best mature, framework in mind. So over to you, Uma. Tell me, spend some more time about what stories for your father, used to tell you back when, you used to come back from work.
Something as simple as, how the collector was looking at how the school is performing, the government school, and how he ensured the teacher absenteeism was not there, and how he was speaking with the students. Or how a particular SP has brought some changes in the department, and ensured those changes are percolating down till the level. So they were very small things that we would talk during dinner or in. So he just kept talking about, because whichever IPS officer he worked with, they were his heroes.
Oh.
And he really admired the IAS officers that he got to work with as well. So he used to come back and then constantly talk about them. Very, very subtly, never saying that you should become one. So he would just put these ideas on the table.
Okay. And those many stories, I think these are different from the media reports which we usually get, right? These are more personal and more nuanced in that way. Anything which you remember in particular, which struck a chord with you, or which you still remember? Or it's all hazy right now?
Nothing in particular, but I remember this being a constant thing at home.
Okay. So from there, then you chose to write JEE, and then you went to IIT Hyderabad. You majored in civil and minored in economics, but you decided to stay out of the placements. And why did that come to pass?
I think that decision probably was not a very rational decision. Made based on, it was just, I assumed, all I have to do is graduate and go to Delhi, and then there I will have my career in 1 year. So me not choosing to appear for the placements was also a kind of denial, like delusion, I would say. I thought it would be all very easy going ahead.
Okay.
In hindsight, I think I should have appeared for the placements, taken part in the whole experience. Whether or not I accepted the job is the second thing, but I think I should have appeared for the placements at least.
But by this time, you had made your mind that you will appear for the services.
Yes, I have.
And did you have anyone who you knew personally, someone senior from college or in around, who kind of was
When I
giving you some
made
gyan?
that decision, and when I just went to Delhi, no, I did not have anybody. But as I started preparing, I saw some of my seniors clearing the exam. Like
Okay.
in 2018, there was Sai Teja ranked 28.
Okay.
So he was my senior.
From college.
Yes.
Okay. And so now what happens when you reach Delhi? What kind of ideas you had, and what was the reality check like? Tell us more about this.
I needed that reality check so bad. So I went to Delhi without any sort of understanding of this exam and what this requires. All I thought was Delhi is where you become an IAS officer.
Okay.
So I went and I joined the coaching for a little bit, but eventually I realized that I was not benefiting from the environment because I was too
Okay.
mature to understand what is even being taught in the class there. I was
Okay.
not able to relate it to the exam. So
Okay.
I was not going through the syllabus or previous year's questions or even understanding what this exam demands. So that went on for a year and I appeared for the prelims. And unfortunately, I cleared prelims that year. That's the worst thing that could have happened to me, and it did. And you know
Okay.
what happens when you clear prelims? You get stuck in that cycle. And so
Yeah.
I went ahead with, again, no understanding, no clarity, nothing, and went ahead and wrote mains.
Okay.
Naturally, I failed. Again, I started for.
Okay. Just a step back on that. So, what happens when, let's say, someone is uninitiated or someone hasn't really thought it through and they start preparing for the exam, versus what happens when you have some idea? How do your first 3 months change? I mean, would you give some idea about, in the hindsight? I mean, obviously, but
Right. If I had properly understood the exam and known a way to go about it, I think I would not have read too much. Back then, I
okay.
was just all ears for anybody who has any advice, and I would take everything and do everything. I would spend like 10, 12 hours maybe back then, unnecessarily reading things that do not matter, that do not help me in the examination. So I was putting in a lot of effort and hours, but without any tangible outcomes.
Okay.
Just
And that continued for a while. That continued.
yeah.
And while this time you were not preparing with any peers or any, you like preparing in
Yeah,
silence.
more or less. I did not have a peer group by then. So I was preparing.
And no mentor, someone who could just guide you, ki, hey, you're spending too much time here, maybe just scale back or leave it for later. Nothing.
Not at all. And I don't even know if I would have, like, if I had a mentor back then, I don't know if I would have understood what the person was saying.
Okay.
Or I would have listened to them.
Okay.
So I wouldn't say lack of mentor was what was stopping me, because I don't know if I would have actually taken the advice and worked on it.
Okay.
So
Okay.
anyway, that went on. And then the same thing happened in the next attempt as well. Still not touching the syllabus, still not doing the previous year's questions.
Sure.
Okay, what I was trying to do was whatever I did in the first attempt, now intensity. I increased the intensity of the same thing.
Okay.
So I failed with a higher intensity.
Okay, so on that note, so a lot of people now talk, especially in the last 2 years, people chat a lot about PYQ and the importance of marrying everything to the syllabus. So much so that it has now become, I mean, it's a common awareness now. If your preparation is not aligned with this, because now everyone has leveled up their prep. So you're going to lose out on, itsy bitsy half mark here, 1 mark, 2 mark there. Right. But this still was your blind spot, even in the second attempt.
Definitely. And I still see people preparing with the same blind spot. Like even today, not understanding the importance of PYQs and the syllabus itself can be a major blind spot.
Okay. So second attempt comes and it passes.
Yeah. But then in the meanwhile, at least I made a good decision to come back home At least I'm
Okay.
not wasting anybody's money. So I came back home and I started preparing from home. But I think it was after second attempt, I sat down and I wanted to evaluate myself as to where I was going wrong. This is when I took a very hard look at what I was doing. So, and it was easy to do it at home rather than in Delhi, where everything is so, you have to be in the race with everybody there. So I
Mm.
found the home environment to be peaceful. So I reevaluated, and this time I understood. Okay, you have to study according to the syllabus. Just make notes as per the syllabus topics, and then you have to practice PYQs to understand
Mm.
what exactly they're asking. So this way,
Mm.
for the third attempt, I could clear my mains. After two
Okay.
failed mains, I went in, and I went and appeared for the interview, but I could not clear it. So in these
Oh,
three attempts, my optional was geography, and it was constantly pulling me down, like
okay.
very, very low scores. So I did not clear after appearing to make interview in the third attempt, but uh, but then there was prelims like nearby. So I went ahead and appeared for prelims. I was really not in the right frame of mind to be writing any exam at that point, but I went ahead and wrote, and I failed.
Oh boy.
Yeah, so that was
This was the first time. This was the second time you were failing.
I. This was the first time I failed in prelims.
Oh yeah. Right.
So that was
Right.
the lowest low that I could have possibly hit,
Imagined and come across.
and
Yeah.
yeah, it was very, very, very bad. But in hindsight, I tell you, that was the best thing that happened to me since I started
Okay.
my preparation. Since I
Okay.
got an opportunity to be out of the cycle, I now started reevaluating things.
Hmm.
I thought, this is a right opportunity to do everything fresh and have a fresh
Hmm.
perspective. And at this point, I decided to change my optional to
Hmm.
anthropology.
Hmm.
So again, it was a very risky decision given the number of years I put in geography. But I thought, if there's any time that I have to take any risk, then that's then. So since I knew the mistakes I was making in geography option, this time around I was very careful. I studied everything by myself from textbooks and not relying on any secondary sources.
Okay.
And
So just let's backtrack a bit. So this is a very interesting roller coaster. So first time you clear prelims, you write the mains, and you didn't clear the mains. Second time you didn't clear the mains again. Third time you reached the interview, and that didn't happen. And fourth time the prelims stitched you. And how was the headspace all around, especially in the last? You were at home, by the way,
yes,
in this time as well, right? And I'm assuming parents would be supporting because they would have seen you. Papa, to anyway, has been in services, so he would know ki it's the right path. But how are you thinking about it yourself? Like,
oh,
how did you manage this?
it was very, very challenging. I was confident on a daily basis. I would question myself on a daily basis, question my choices, and question everything possible. I had zero trust in myself at that point.
Uh,
I did not know what to do. I was feeling very useless to be
Was it around
honest.
that time when you
Right.
became a part of Civilsdaily, I
Yes.
think?
And then at that time, I wanted to do something, be
Hmm.
of use somewhere and tell
Hmm.
myself that I can do something. And that is
Hmm.
why I reached out to the Civils Daily team and they were kind enough to offer me a role.
Hmm. And you had such rich experience, which now undergone a self evolution
Yes.
kind of a process as well. Okay, so let me segue to this part now. So when you came and you became a part of the mains team, and I'm sure you saw a lot of question answer copies as well, and you had your own framework to assess and allocate marks. What are usually the blind spots or the pitfalls for an immature guy or a very beginner person versus mature? Can you spend some time in this? Like, this is how you used to check the copies and how we used to evaluate.
Right, right. So when I started checking the copies, that is when I looked at answers from a person who is checking those answers, not as a person who is answering those answers. So that was a major, major shift and a useful shift to understand the answers. So like I was seeing like when somebody was writing too much in unnecessary paragraph formats where it's not needed, I didn't feel like giving them marks. So, and when somebody was introducing well with short and good introductions, when they're concluding with some punchlines in the conclusion, it automatically motivated me to give about more marks there. And it's something as simple as, when somebody fills the entire paper without leaving any spaces, that kind of told me that, okay, this person knows what they're doing. That kind of. So these small things I picked up. And I also picked up what should not be done. Don't write too much. Be very precise about what you're trying to do. And if you do not meet the demand of the question, you might as well not attempt that question.
Okay. Why? Usually people say that attempt as much as you can, but you think it gives a bad impression?
Yes, but so when you are attempting a question, and you're not addressing the demand, it tends to irritate the checker, I feel. If you know the demand, okay, just don't write anything. Respect the person who's checking your copy. They're not fools sitting there.
So this is how you used to evaluate copies.
Yeah.
This is a standard. Okay, interesting. Okay. And what about frameworks and putting those in place, the toolkits which we usually talk about?
So, like all the basic stuff that all the toppers keep talking about, which people actually find it difficult to execute, like using flowcharts, using diagrams, writing good introductions, good conclusions. So these examples, like lots of examples, and committees, articles. So I realized you can. We think everybody wants to do these things in the exam, but somehow they cannot do it on the actual day. That's because they're not practicing enough to be able to do that on the final day. So
makes sense.
So we need to practice a lot, write a lot of papers and see what if you are able to do what you want to do. So I practiced adequately so that when I was writing on the final day, I knew what I was going to write in those papers. And I was on an autopilot mode, to that point. So I practiced till that point where I could be very comfortable. No matter what they ask, I knew how to address the demand and write a decent answer.
So the muscle memory kind of would kick in and, you'd...
Definitely. Correct? I strongly believe in that.
Okay. And you did go through all the PYQs of mains and prelims previous years. Even though you took a different optional anthro, you did it by the books and by the basics, right? Okay. What you just said right now, right? We imagine, because the knowledge is everywhere. I mean, all the information is all around, all YouTube. This video would also go and this would be much more practical, but again, this would be like, hey, you should do like this. I want you to tell me what all things you found difficult to execute, even when you knew them. So that it eases the guilt for the Janta at large.
Yeah. So even after I checked papers at Civilsdaily and I developed the sense of what's a good answer and what's a bad answer and what should not be done. So when it was my turn to actually start writing answers for the mains, I was still not able to completely execute it. So I have a friend who already cleared the exam, and he was kind enough to point out at my paper and show your answers are bad. You really need to be changing them. You know that you have to change them, then why are you not doing it? Okay. And then he pinpointed and showed it to me. See, at the same point, you could have written it that way. So when somebody pointed it out very clearly, criticized my answers, I think criticized, but also showed me the way to do it.
Way to go.
Because even in my previous attempts, I had a lot of criticism on my answers, especially geography answers, but I did not have a way out as to how could I have done it better. So I think this was difficult, but again, with sheer practice, writing high number of exams, like mock exams, it helped me gradually develop.
Makes sense. I mean, the structured criticism kind of helps. Yes. Where you show. Were you also doing this when you were evaluating the papers?
Yes,
definitely. Giving an alternate.
I remember one of the copies that I was checking, the person, aspirant, he always complained about whoever was checking the papers. So he would call me up and then we would have a discussion and then I would try to give him my point of view as a check. So and then eventually he understood what I was trying to say, and he was also like, okay, this is how we can go about it.
Oh, makes sense. That's quite a rich journey then when you were behind the scenes, right?
Yes.
I mean, I've heard this from now 4 or 5 guys that being a part of the journey of assessing answers gets you in the examiner shoes, and then you're able to empathize with them better, and then that becomes an extra variable. But this thing is also important that there were other folks, or there were one guy to make sure, look you in the eye and tell them, hey, this is wrong and this is the way to do it. One of the interesting things which we started doing very recently was that, like I said, right, information is all available. People know what all to do. They might not know what not to do, but they know what all to do. But they're not able to keep themselves in the flow of the thing. The momentum and the motivation kind of leaves them after 7 or 8 days. And what happens is either you digress and do a lot of padhai, but don't stitch it up back, right? So what we started doing was we started adapting a challenge mode within the 3D modules at 21 days, and we'll finish Lakshmikant or whatever, and you have to submit your proof of work.
Okay.
And if you do, you'll get all the money back and whatever, and more rewards and all that. So just egg them with whatever motivation, external, intrinsic we can find. Hope that it sticks to them. And once you do it, then hey, this is what happens when you do it. So a lot of kids returned and said, Abhi tak to I had no idea only what is it to study with such a momentum. And I thought I'd always check with the rankers that what did you used to do when momentum breaks? What kind of external constraint you to add? Ki nahi, I have to study. So what was your journey on this, like managing the motivations?
So, since I've had like a long journey, I managed to find an excellent peer group in the process. So we used to generally have like we used to hold each other accountable. And sometimes I used to, like, if I don't feel like studying on a particular day, or if I see that I'm breaking my consistency, so we would sit on Zoom calls and study. Everybody studies their own thing, so you have a Zoom call. And we would announce our targets in advance. And so the other person would ask, like a peer, where are you on your targets? And you can't just lie to somebody's face. So you will finish it, and that hits you.
So this is exactly what we are doing also. I mean, great to see it tying up. I'll tell you an interesting study. Stanford ke koi to neuro professor hai, and I shared with this Porush as well. They said that 50% of the win you can get if you have an environment like this, because otherwise, for everyone thinking ki willpower alone will do, there are 10 Harvard, Stanford engineers with algorithms at their beck and command out there to catch you and make you digress from whatever you want to do. Right?
So, I think it's very inefficient to rely on willpower.
Yeah. And then you'll end up feeling guilty, and then that sets in, and then regrets set in, and all these negative emotions just take a massive toll. And that struggle is so bad. It just, yes. But so now for this last attempt, what were the things which uniquely you did this time, which that this gave me the edge, or let's talk about the nitty-gritties, half mark, one mark extra. Like, what did you put into the table?
So first thing I told myself is I was not going to read anything extra. I have accumulated enough content over the years, and content is not getting me anywhere. So that was my first thing, like no extra addition anywhere. And the second thing was how to add value to my answers. So first was the presentation. Like my friend said, I needed to change the way I was presenting. So I tried to present in a flow chart format, or bullet points, underline the keywords, cutting down unnecessary things. I even finished all the pages given in the exam. This may sound silly, but I told myself I'm not going to leave any space that UPSC has given me to write an answer. They can go ahead and penalize me from exceeding the word limit, but I will go on write. So this. And secondly, I prepared introductions and conclusions for all the syllabus topics in both GS papers and anthropology. Every syllabus topic, I had a good introduction and good conclusion beforehand. So, and all of this was put in a sheet. I wrote them in an A4 sheet, and then I had them prepared. So when there's a question on a particular topic, I would immediately
remember and recall.
So I knew the introduction and conclusion already. It wouldn't take me even seconds to finish these two bits of an answer. So the body I would write as per whatever is asked in the.
Okay.
And I emphasized on a lot of examples. adding value through case studies, very small ones, and flow charts, diagrams. I try to explain as much as possible. Even there was a question on cellulose. I knew nothing about it, but I explained what I knew using
Okay.
diagrams, and I try to relate it to why is that we should study this process in the first place. So
Okay.
I try to relate it to eco-friendly waste management technologies and how maybe we can utilize some of these processes anywhere.
Hmm.
So I was trying to like extract marks by writing relevant things and addressing the
Makes
demand
sense.
rather
Do
than
you think like this? Is this the way how you kept making it interesting for yourself? Because the preparation is way long and gestation period of this exam is huge.
yeah.
Did you used to think like this to help stay active with the material?
Yeah, to some extent, because I also stopped reading any kind of monthly magazines or whatever. I only used to read one newspaper in the morning, and I wrote down whatever are the important topics I feel for prelims and main, just the topics, and then I used to prepare a short note on those topics. So when I'm preparing any, let's say if there's 5G in the news, I know 5G is an important topic, so I have to make a short note on this topic. So this is how I used to like, what is 5G? How is it better than? What diagram can this have? And
Okay.
how is it useful? Trying to apply it as much as possible. So for
Okay.
each paper, I barely had like 20 or 30 current affairs topics to prepare. Because from my experience, I understood that UPSC is not going to ask you obscure current affairs. They
Okay.
only ask you whatever you're seeing in front of you every day, which
Okay.
is the news. So I selected these topics, just 20 or 30 per paper, and
Mhm.
I just stuck to them. I made notes on them. I revised them multiple times. I relied on different sources while I was making my own note on those topics.
But you kept those themes sacrosanct, whatever
Yes.
you had picked. And did it pan out the same way in the paper, the way you thought?
Yeah, surprisingly well. And for example, there was a question on James Webb Telescope in GS3.
Yeah.
Because
Yeah.
in the difference between Hubble and James Webb, it was explained in the front page of the Hindu newspaper in a box. And I knew if this was an important topic for me. So I had made notes. So I replicated whatever I had. And when I was making my notes, I also tried to look at the application aspect. Like, what does this mean to science?
Hmm.
I think at that time, President of United States said something about this, how it's a humbling moment for humanity or something like that. So I also picked that quote and I used that quote verbatim in my conclusion. Like,
Okay.
this is not just a scientific achievement, it's a leap forward for humanity, and how humbling it is to be able to look back into the moment where everything began.
Yeah.
So he said something.
With a fresh set of eyes. Wow. That's poetic.
Uh,
And would it be possible whenever you have time to give us a sneak peek of these notes and PDFs that you maintain, right? So we'll add them, add a link to them,
yeah.
and we'll seek out a time whenever you have time. So to let us through some of these notes that you made, because what's happening is that this is the practical way to prepare, and some of the people would not know where they understand this in theory, but they don't know the beauty of it, right? So when someone who's been there, done that, she explains the beauty of the process. I mean, it kind of livens up the moment, just the way you said, right? You took the cellulose questions and then you thought of, okay, the same phenomena, if I can apply to the environmental technologies, etc., and how they can derive from benefit. I'm sure is the way scientists think, but that gets the beauty out much
Right.
much
So
better.
this is possible when you take that risk to cut down on monthlies or whatever other information.
Makes
There's
sense.
so much FOMO. Okay, when you pick up any monthly, there are at least like what 100 topics. How can you
Yeah.
develop this kind of depth or width on all those 100?
How did you get this then? So you were already coming from your history already, you had failed the third prelims.
Yes.
You had so much riding on your back. You had taken up a new optional for that matter.
Yeah.
And then how did you let go of this FOMO and go wide and
So
into
actually, in the third attempt, when I cleared my mains, after failing my in main second attempt, I started seeing I started feeling that there's a lot of trash around me. I was putting a lot of like unnecessary things. I had to cut down on that trash. And
Okay.
the trash that was clearly visible was a pile of monthly magazines that I would read, revise, underline, highlight, and what not, and retain nothing.
Yeah.
So, okay, that was very visible trash. So I had to eliminate it. And it worked for me. That was the first time I cleared mains. When I told myself, okay, I'm going to pick per paper, I'm going to pick like 30 current affairs topics, and these I will prepare well. And if something else comes up, okay, then TK, I will leave that question. What can I do now? Fine, let
Yeah.
it go. But these 30 topics I picked for a paper, I'll be very thorough and I will be very wide dimensions wise if something were to. And I'll try to use these topics as examples in somewhere. Basically, my intention was to extract the maximum out of those 30 topics that I was preparing for a paper. So
And did you ratify this with your friend who's already in the service? That this is what my modus operandi is. He said yes. Makes sense.
yes, like go ahead.
Okay, give me a sense of so how much did you cut down? So from a pile of I don't know how many themes you cut down to how many themes? Like how drastic was this focus?
Like it is very, very, very drastic because imagine it's 30 or 35 topics per paper. GS1 had 30 or 35.
Yeah, that's yeah.
Who had 30 or 35? If I find something beyond that, for current affairs, I'm talking about current affairs.
Yeah.
So I would cut it down, like not necessary. If I have to put in another topic, then that means I have to remove some other topic.
My God, that is
I had to
that's
like see after failing so many times, you'll be like you have to do something to get out of this. Like I can't keep doing the same thing again and again. And since my this worked in mains, I knew I can continue with this strategy.
hmm.
I carried over. And that is when I also realized that I need to take some risk and not be bogged down by what everybody else is doing. Like I can just believe in whatever method I feel appropriate. So maybe like I can go with it.
And so when you did write your mains exam, that this last one, you knew that you've hit the bullseye. You knew that you're gonna get good marks
Right,
and had
right.
that sense.
Uh, so rather than knowing that I hit the bullseye, I knew what I was going to write in the exam. I knew what
Hmm.
introductions were going to go, what conclusions are going to go, what kind of presentation was going to be there. It was only like the final, like finale of my execution because I was already executing in the test series. Little by little, I was improving. And then, so I had like for international relations, I had 4 or 5 quotes given by uh, Ministry of External Affairs, generic quotes which I can use in any IR answer. But
Hmm.
but I
Hmm.
decided beforehand that my IR answers will have only quote as conclusion, and those quotes will be out of these 5 or 10 quotes that I have.
That must be giving you a lot of peace of mind also,
Oh
right? I
my
mean,
god, a lot. Like I was never like this was the first attempt where I was like not overwhelmed. I felt like things were in my control. Like I was like
and
satisfied.
and did you also see like, while you were evaluating copies of other folks, were you giving them the same funda that you're
Yes,
digressing a lot?
again and again, like I used to write there. Like whatever I experienced and I learned, I used to write very clearly. I used to give very detailed feedback rather than like I used to spend a lot. My friends used to ask, why do you spend so much time in checking the
Checking the
copy?
answer.
I told them I really need to feel useful at this point. So I will, if somebody is benefiting from my thing, so let me just do it.
That's very beautiful. And then to the interview, how did this translate? I mean, what did you do different for the interview this time?
So my again interview, I didn't do much this time. I cut down stuff again. So last time when I appeared for interview, I prepared everything under the sun. Like I spread myself too thin. Again, this time same thing. Only 50 current affairs topics. The most important 50 current affairs topics, and every single question that was asked to me in the final exam came from those 50 topics. Not even one was out of that. And
That's massive bullseye rate.
yeah,
I mean, your thumbnail should be the minimalist aspirant. What gave you this? confidence, 50 topics. That's all you prepared for the interview
Right.
test.
And
Nothing came out of that.
no, nothing outside of that. And these topics also, like, I did this because from my first interview experience, I understood that they're not going to ask kuch bhi. They will ask you what you're reading in the newspaper every day. So,
Yeah.
for instance, I got asked a question on Ukraine conflict. I got asked on caste census, or BRICS that was going on, G20, like all this very brain drain and foreign universities in the country, PVTG, which was in the budget then.
Mm.
So all these questions I prepared, and then I got to revise them again and again.
Mm.
So when I was answering, I could answer them with a bit of confidence. So in the previous attempt, I was very underconfident.
So what was the contrast in scores last interview to this interview?
So 165 was my first interview score, 187 second interview score.
Yeah, makes sense. Makes all the difference.
Yeah. And
awesome.
Second thing, I started to understand what interview is about. Initially, I thought it was mains exam in another format.
Yeah.
This time, I was very sure. I had like 5 thumb rules. I have to be confident. I have to be like polite and humble. I have to be balanced. I have to be cheerful. So like 4 or 5 things, and I made sure that I was delivering those through my answers.
Was there any googly? Was there any bouncer in the interview which you didn't expect?
Maybe
or was it smooth sailing?
Fortunate that I did not have any such thing. The board was very cordial. But the first question I got asked, which I feel could have, made like broken the whole thing if I didn't answer properly. She asked me, the ma'am, Satyavati ma'am, she asked me, what was I doing in the past 5 years? Like, it's a long time. So instead of, if it was my first interview, I would have probably felt insecure and tried to justify or, show I was actually doing something. But instead, I admitted, I said, ma'am, I was doing a lot of mistakes and learning from those mistakes. That's why it took me a while. Nice. Just that. I did not say anything beyond that I was working here, nothing. I just said this. And then she was like, okay, then it's over.
That's a nice segue.
Like understanding what the personality test is about.
Makes sense. Especially, I mean, this is such a sweet conversation. In the sense, it's very simple. Even the arch and the acceptance of what they were doing wrong. We just had a webinar like 2 days back, I think, with Divyansh, previous year ranker. And he said that, when you're entering the preparation, it's so much overwhelming because, like you said, there's a lot of noise coming around. And if you're not practical, if you're not making short notes, if you're not tying it back to the syllabus, which is easier said than done. So find a way to make it happen. Right? Like one of the way, like I said, we thought, let's give challenges to kids. But having said that, tell me, what are the things that are most difficult to avoid when you're starting the preparation for an aspirant that you would wish it were easy, but it's so damn difficult to avoid?
I think those monthly compilations, they create so much FOMO. So that monthly compilations, and second, taking a lot of advice from a lot of people, seniors or mentors or whatever. It's good. It's good that we take advice, but in the middle of all that advice, we forget to just ask ourselves as to what we think is right and believe in what we think is right. If we turn out to be wrong, then we can evolve, we can adapt the strategy, but we never ask ourselves as to what we think is the right way to go about this exam. We keep asking others. And it's difficult not to ask others because there's so many others.
Yeah, true. Especially, true. That's true. Especially with so much information all around. Every second day, some other strategy will come.
Right. And the third thing is, it's very difficult not to put ourselves under pressure, immense pressure. Like somehow, for some reason, we pressure ourselves. Easy attempt mein karna hai, first attempt or whatever. And then we feel so bad when we fail. Like it's so difficult not to feel bad when we fail.
Yeah.
But I think once you think failure teaches a lot, but all we do is sit and sulk about it, which I did as well. So that's very difficult in our society or even in our UPSC
Makes sense.
to
True. I mean,
not feel bad about failure. But I think we should not. It's high time that we normalize.
but it's also not easy to put things into perspective, like the way you have right now. It either comes with experience or comes with the right set of environment around you, or someone who has some belief in you and he backs it by, okay, this failed. What next? Like you said, right? Your senior who's in service used to tell you this is wrong and that you should do this, because any of these things half done would either lose the context or lose what next.
Right.
Makes sense. Awesome, Uma. Thanks for taking the time out. I'm glad we could do this over Zoom so fast, so that this chat came out nicely. That's the whole point of Raw and Real, that we keep it real, especially for the last 2 years I've been observing, and happily so, that people are just coming out and telling what did work, what worked, what won't work for you, and it's difficult to remove those blind spots. But if you can, just please do. So that's a wonderful conversation. Thank you, and I wish you the best. If it's possible, do send me some of the PDF notes which you have. The laundry list of whatever you zero down on, because that would be interesting. This is, in fact, having spoken with so many people do talk about short notes, but I have not come across anyone who says, I just minimize on my bouquet of themes and topics to such an extent that I took that sacrosanct, and it panned out for you. So the loop completed very fast, right? Thank you. I'm happy, and good luck for you. Okay.
Thank you so much.